All righty. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. And this is our all things Latin America edition. And who better to talk about the various current events and struggles against imperialism, the highest state of crapitalism in the region, than Saheli Chowdhury. She's an Indian journalist, media critic, and NGO critic who is part of the editorial team of Orinoco Tribune, which covers Latin American international affairs through a Chavista, critical leftist, anti-imperialist perspective. So, firstly, Saheli, our returning champion, welcome back to One Plus One. It's really great to have you back on.
Now, Yuri, thanks a lot to you for having me back like so many times.
It's always great to have you on. It's a pity that we don't have our good comrades Jesus and Joe Emmersberger with us, but we will definitely do that in another edition. So let's get down to business now. The first thing I wanted to ask you about before we talk about the various countries that we are going to talk about is several weeks ago we all learned of the tragic death of Nathalia Urban, who was a superb Brazilian independent journalist who was based, I believe, in London first and later Scotland. Correct? Right. So, talk to us about who this superb voice of people power, not just in Brazil, but globally, was. What were some of her greatest uncoverings she did with respect to Brazilian affairs? And please feel free to take however long you want, speaking about her, your friendship with her, and why our respective audiences, One Plus One and Orinoco Tribune readers and listeners, should check out her body of work and celebrate her legacy.
Okay, so well, I will start with whatever you mentioned. So the tragic passing of Natalia was not just, I mean, not it was a big harm to journalism, definitely, anti-imperialist journalism, definitely global South journalism also, and it was also personal loss for me because she was a friend. So I came across her work. In fact, she was a sort of inspiration for me when I started. I mean, why I would do anti-imperialist journalism, why I would want to work with a Venezuelan outlet, etc. So I believe that a lot of this was also because of Natalia, because of reading her work in we wanted to talk about her work. So she had published extensively in both English and Portuguese, I mean Brazilian media, like Portuguese language media. I first came across her work, I believe, in Jacobin, but Jacobin Brazil. And then she had also published in the English, its English outlet also. She then we'd have our work on Brazil Wire. Um, then there is the Brazilian news outlet Brazil 247, where she had, I mean, she was working at the time of her passing. So she not just she wrote, she interviewed people, she went to the places. I mean, she put her body to the work. So she would go to the places where she would work on it, from where she would be reporting. It's not like she would a lot of journalists these days do. They just sit in their comfortable rooms, comfortable offices, and go on typing stuff without having the bare minimum idea of what they are talking about or writing about. In most cases, they're really stenographers. I mean, I recently came to know about this thing, that journalists who write about, for example, economy, they don't even analyze the economic data that they might be writing about. It's other people. There is a group who is the data analysis group. They will analyze that economy data. I'm just giving an example. They will analyze that economy data, make an analysis themselves, sort of an article, send it to the writers, to the writing room, and then the writer would write it as if they had did all the analysis, all the study, all the investigation that goes into writing. So this is something I did not know. I only recently found out, and I was flabbergasted. I was so surprised. But of course, Natalia was not like that. We are not like, I mean, we don't have the resources. So when we don't have the resources and we don't have I mean, when there is no path, you would have to create the path, right? And Natalia was one person who had created a path of her own, like created a path of anti-imperialist journalism in a country that also has a good anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist history, that is Brazil. She was, as far as I know, she was born in Sao Paulo, and maybe in the outskirts, in a rural area, and like she had left home at 19 years of age to make her life. She studied anthropology. Okay, so that was, I believe that that was something, and she also said that that was something that had shaped her worldview, made her into the person that she was, like, because her journalism was based on love for humans, and that was something that was inculcated by, first by her family, especially she mentioned her grandmother, and later by her study in anthropology. So that she would later go use all that experience, that knowledge, the lived experience of herself into journalism. And she, when she left Brazil and went to first England, she stayed for some time in London. You were correct. And then she went to live in Edinburgh, where she lived for almost 10 years. So when she had gone to England, she did not even, like, she was very daring, I would say. She did not even know the language very well, etc. But she would still go there. She established herself there and made her name and her mark as a journalist, feminist, anti-imperialist, anti-racist, and every sort of good thing that you can imagine. So I would think that that would be her legacy, that she would report. And when she would report, she would check what she was reporting. She would revise the data. Very, in very, very detailed manner. She would first be 100% sure that what she was reporting was true, and only then she would be reporting on it. And this is difficult. I mean, in this world, when we have too much information, a lot of that information is false. Like, we
Yeah.
live in an age of information, but we live in an age of lies also. So
Yeah.
from that, it's difficult to get the truth out. But she would do that. She would sift the truth, like sifting wheat out of hay, whatever it is. And then she reported on that. Like, she was very truthful. And that is something that we should all aspire to. Like, I would hold her as an example for aspiring, not just for myself or for yourself, but for any and all aspiring journalists. And if you ask me how she became a friend, like how we had connected, it was thanks to Anticonquista. You know, probably Anticonquista is a
Oh yes,
um,
of course, yes.
okay, so Anticonquista is a group of anti-imperialist Latinos, Chicanos based in the US who also try to maintain or recover the connections with their home countries, their people, their communities. So it was, there they used to have this show called Nuestra America, which is about, like, just like yours. So all things Latin America, but they would have it every week. So that will be going through whatever happened throughout the week in Latin America, or what geopolitical events had effects on Latin America. And it was there that I first met her. And I mean, I had the honor of sharing space with her on some of those news shows. And I also had the honor and the privilege of experiencing firsthand her brilliance. So I mean, I did not expect that she would pass like this. I mean, it was unexpected, tragic. Of course, people who are close to her, or people who had been in England, etc., they say that it was not really that unexpected, in the sense, well, in a sense that I would say that we should all, you know, be close to each other, even if we are not physically close. We should remain connected.
Sorry to interrupt, but to clarify, now uh now the Scotland Yard and the Scottish police, they're investigating what happened, but those close to her feel that she was suffering from a deep depression. So some people are 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 believing that she committed suicide, but that still is being investigated at the moment.
Yes, that's still investigated, though it's probably, like, it has been taken for granted, like almost 95% taken for granted, that that was what had happened. And it's not even like she had hidden her depression or something. People knew that she had been depressed for some time. She even posted on social media that, I think, her last post was on 23rd of September at night. I mean, local time at UK time at night, and she posted that she had been like the most depressed in her life. But I only came to know about it later. I came to know about it on 27th when I came across the news of her death from another good friend of both hers and mine. So just she had said that she was like she had never been as depressed in life as she was at that moment. And before that, she had asked some friends to, well, she had also asked friends to like get help her get a second job so that she could pay rent. Like she was probably looking at like a possibility of becoming homeless or not being able to pay rent or something like that. And it is because of this reason, and not just this, but this sort of reason, that I believe that we should all be close. Even if we are like, we may be in different parts of the world, but we should remain close. We should, you know, pick maintain the connections among ourselves, and if we have problems we should talk, because it's important to talk. Like it's not necessary to keep everything within ourselves. I mean, I am far from UK, but you are closer, and there are
Yeah.
people who are in UK who could have helped her if we had known. Like if I had known, I would have contacted one or two people and not there. Let's see if this person is like facing financial problems, like at least help her with that, out with that. I mean, mental health or other issues, well, we can probably cannot do. We can only probably talk and help each other, but still that is also help. So I'd just say that we are who are in independent media, we should just not be thinking about work all the time or thinking about fighting or resisting all the time. We should also be taking care of ourselves. We should also be connected and take care of each other, like ourselves and of each other. So that is family. I think that is from where we should begin, because we are talking about a world where we should be more connected, where we should cooperate more. So in that case, we should, like, charity cooperation begins at home. Cooperation should begin with ourselves.
I have to ask them this follow up. I have to ask them this follow up question, which is, do you think there are some people she probably wanted to reach out to, but felt that nope, I only know them in a professional manner. I only know them when we're doing panels. I only know them when it comes to work, and therefore she didn't want to, I guess, violate the sort of like boundaries. I know. I mean, uh, I've admitted on 1+1 that I suffer from a form of manic depression, and I also suffer from anxiety. And I know when I get really down sometimes, I mean, I don't reach out to guests that have been on the show, even if it has been multiple, even if it has been multiple guests on the show, because I feel like, oh no, there's boundaries, like like that's work. I can't burden people who come on the show with my own personal problems and stuff like that. Do you feel she had that sort of problem, but and so she sort of suffered deeply in silence when it came to whatever problem she had in her personal life?
Well, that's maybe one thing. Well, first of all, I would tell you, and of course, I'll tell everyone that they should not be thinking about boundaries or violating boundaries. I mean, you can violate boundaries. Life is more important than everything else. So, I mean, which we always say, not just we, I mean, people who are at war, they will tell you that if you live, then everything is possible. So that's one thing. Secondly, I think what happened, I mean, in case of violating work boundaries, I don't think it was more about work boundaries. It's more about a cultural thing, in the sense, I know that our people would say that India and Brazil are on two different sides of the world, but there are some cultural similarities which I know, and one of them is that asking for help is considered to be a weakness. Okay,
Mm.
so I think that's a capitalist thing, but anyway, so asking for help, or if not even
Exactly.
asking for help, like any sort of showing a weakness is considered not just unprofessional, it is just considered that you are a weak person. You cannot resolve your own problems, or you are asking other people for help, which means you have some sort of, well, I mean, stupidity is a strong word, but that is the idea. basically, that you cannot solve your own problems. You are not using your intelligence, you are not using your own resources, you are not using your resourcefulness, etc., to solve your problems. You are a weak person, and we don't want to show weakness. Of course, for many reasons we don't want to show weakness, and being a foreigner and a woman, one would even want to show weakness a lot less. So I believe that that could have been a problem, apart from the fact that, yes, she might have also thought about violating work boundaries, but it could also be that simply the cultural thing. We all have this problem. Before asking for help, we'll be thinking 100 times. I also don't ask for help. I am also very close to when it comes to this sort
Yeah.
of things. And after her passing, I believe that it has changed my view. I mean, maybe it has not changed me. I believe it's not like you change from night to day, like from today to night to this morning, you are a new person. It rarely happens, but it actually changed in some way my point of view about this. And I'm now insisting to everyone that, well, if I have problems, I'll tell you. And if you have, you should tell me. We should be connected. We should know more about each other, like about each other as persons, as real, and not just about each other's work, which is there. And yes, we will support each other in work, but we should also support each other as individuals, as persons, as members of the same community.
Yeah, in fact, I'm actually just I'm trying to find a tribute you wrote to her on Orinoco Tribune, but at the moment I can't seem to find it, but I'll try to find it later and
Okay, on
post
Orinoco
it.
Tribune, I can share it with you, I believe. It was not me, I just translated it. It was published on Jacobin, Brazil, where she worked. So I'll find it just now and I'll share it with you so that you can, if you wish, you can just put it on your screen or something. But yeah, let me just look for it. I'll share it with you right now. But I wrote, yes, I wrote also something, but I wrote two things, I believe, on Facebook just after I found out about her passing, and a bit later when I found more information about what happened. But I mean, it is still difficult to process. If you know, it's still difficult to
Oh yeah, yeah.
process.
No, no, no.
That
I
she
can
is not
imagine.
here anymore.
And that and that being said, although
Yeah, that is the link that I shared with you.
yeah, and although I didn't follow her oh, okay, yeah, I have that. Although I didn't follow her work as closely as, say, somebody like Rania Khalek or or Camilla Escalante and other brilliant female independent muckrakers like that. I was always but I know for a fact when I would see her on panels like the International Manifesto Group when they would cover Brazilian affairs, I was always I was always super impressed with her, and I always thought to myself, this is somebody I definitely need to get on 1+1. In fact, you even recommended that I try to get her on 1+1, and I tried multiple times to reach out to her, but simply didn't get a response. And actually, it's sadly ironic because Scotland is a place I frequent many times because one of my best friends is based there with her boyfriend. We've done multiple trips in Scotland and other places, and I guess in another lifetime or in hindsight, had me and Nathalia had, befriended each other, or had I, corresponded with her and had her on 1+1 and knew that she was going through these struggles with, depression, money problems, and, and stuff like that, I would have definitely, had gone in touch with my, dear friend in Glasgow and say, hey, can you help this person out? It's very important. But sadly, though, our paths never crossed, and it's very sad because she was a brilliant journalist, and we did a tribute to John Pilger, who is so internationally known and revered, and and stuff like that. Somebody like Nathalia, who's coming out in this strange world of independent left journalism, oftentimes, and and we've kind of talked about this, offhand, and we've also had serious conversations both on there and off the air. 1+1 has a very small audience, and and on a very good day, we get 100 or 200 something views. Orinoco Tribune, which constantly does amazing journalism work, amazing analysis, and so forth, is criminally underrated, is criminally overlooked. And Nathalia is part of that generation of independent, people powered journalists who are criminally overlooked. And unless they're, and who knows why some people are more popular than others, but she definitely, although she did amazing work, she wasn't that kind of like rock star journalism of Camila Escalante or Rania Khalek, Abby Martin, and other brilliant female journalists, and that's what makes her death all the more sad. But that being said, our deepest condolences to her family, to Brazil Wire and the teams that she worked with. And when I read that when I read that she was based in Scotland, and that she was part of an organization that would try to link up Brazilian immigrants and Latin American immigrants and other immigrants to come together and know that, like, hey, you're not alone in very rainy, very depressing, impoverished Scotland. Like, there is a community out there for you. There is a like-minded leftist community out there for you. And again, it's such a shame that our paths never crossed, because I would have loved to have helped her out with that and get her in touch with with good dear friends I know. But that being said, my Brazilian, no, my Portuguese and my Spanish is of non-existence, but I will just say gracias a la vida, obrigado, Nathalia, for all you've done for not just Brazilian journalism, but for global journalism, because it is because of voices like her, like Brian Muir, and even Marilava Lima, who's an English teacher who's been on this program. If not for voices like that, people like that, we would have never known that actually Lula was a good president, and actually the Workers' Party did try to do a lot of good, but they had to fight with two arms tied behind their back. And if not for the journalism of her, and although I have my many disagreements and issues with him, but if not for people like her, Glenn Greenwald and his team at Intercept Brazil, we would have all have just left, Brazil to be, devoured by the fascist movement of Bolsonaro, back to the teeth by both liberals and the far right in the West. And no, so her journalism really did give particularly Western audience a much better understanding of Brazilian affairs, and also, making people go like, look, guys, I know you're angry with your leftists for their failures and for the betrayals, but don't project that onto Brazilian affairs when like all Latin American countries, they like, as you've said many times, there's no such thing as center right. There's no such thing as liberalism in Latin America. It's either socialism, however imperfect, or effing barbarism, which is the far right. And that's why, and again, it's very sad that she will no longer be enlightening us, decolonizing our minds and whatnot. So deepest condolences to you and Orinoco Tribune team, and deepest condolences to the team at Brazil Wire and others who worked with Nathalia during her short but incredible life.
You'd know, I mean, even Lula, you mentioned Lula. So Lula also paid his condolences for her, and he has also requested the Scotland Yard and the Scottish police both to of course, to just investigate, to investigate her passing properly. And he also he also raised an angle of which I was not aware. He asked the Scottish police to look if she had suffered domestic violence, which might also be true. So
Oh, wow.
yes, exactly. I mean, which might be like a president would not say it out of nowhere. I mean, if someone like Lula would not be making an offhand comment. He mentioned that. He said that the police should be looking at it because there were circumstances that might indicate that, and they might. I mean, Lula might have a better knowledge and understanding of these things, of course, through his foreign ministry and everything. So that is a big important issue that also faces women everywhere, irrespective of how successful or how public their lives might be.
Well, may she forever, may she rest in peace, and may she forever rest in power. May her compassionate legacy live on in the journalism that we do and even struggle to do. And also important, mental health is health and should be part of single payer healthcare systems and public option systems. But that's definitely another story for another day. And again, obrigado, Natalia, and gracias a la vida, and viva Nathalia Urban. And well, while we're on the subject of Brazil and Lula, that's a perfect segue to this question. Now, we're not going to talk too much about Brazil because Brazil really deserves an entire program in and of itself. But one question I did want to ask you, because I've not been able to do a program on Brazil for a long time, much to my regret. But I'm curious, what are the Brazilian authorities doing, or what have they been trying to do in response with respect to the Bolsonaro fascistic cult followers who tried to storm the barricades of the Brazilian High Court and Congress, thinking that they were cheated? I'm curious your response on
that. Okay, so actually, I think the Brazilian governments at least tried to do the right thing. Okay, so what they did was the people that they could catch, the perpetrators that they could arrest, that they could apprehend at the time or shortly afterwards, those people are already in the process. I mean, already in the, not just investigation, the investigation is ongoing, it's okay, but they're also in the process of trial. So there is a trial. Now you should remember something, that Brazil never had a judicial reform, although there was like Lula had 2 terms in power as president, and then there was Dilma Rousseff was of course removed by a coup in her second term, but still they had like 3.5 terms of a left government, but they could not carry out a judicial reform. And we should remember why. Because we should, at this moment, we should think about the separation of powers of the state. So in case of Brazil, you have the government, which is the executive, the presidency and the government. Then you have the legislative, which is the Congress and Senate. And then you have the judiciary. Now, in order to do any kind of constitutional reform, I mean, judicial reform will be a constitutional reform. So any kind of constitutional reform means that you need to get qualified majority, like 2/3 majority in both Congress and Senate, that is in Parliament, in order for the reform to be approved. Now, although Lula had 2 terms, and this is his third one, and Dilma had 1.5 terms of government, she was removed in her second term, but midway through her second term. Workers' Party and the left in Brazil generally never had any sort of majority in parliament, never. Okay, so it's like
important, and that's
yes.
very, and by the way, that's very, 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 very important to know when we do talk about Brazilian affairs, when people say things like, oh, why didn't the Workers' Party stop the drug war? Or, oh, why didn't the Workers' Party do this? Why didn't the Workers' Party do that? Why couldn't the Workers' Party nationalize this? Well, it's because in this democracy that people keep propping up, liberal democracy, they had to fight with 2 hands tied behind their back most of the time,
Exactly.
and they
Or
never
at least
got the,
at least with
and they never had
one
the
hand tied
majority.
behind their back and the other tied forward, maybe.
Yeah,
But anyway, so
never had,
that is that
and they
is
never had the majority Chavez or Maduro had. They never had the majority that Evo Morales had. They never had even Morena under AMLO, who many people say is very much a socialist reformist, not a radical. But even they had a majority that in which they could enact, much needed sweeping reforms. The workers had.
no. In case of Mexico, I'll come to Mexico. I think Gabriel mentioned it already when he was here, but Morena also did not have a qualified majority. That is why it could not do constitutional reforms under AMLO. We'll come to Mexico afterwards. So, I mean, if you wish. But in case of Brazil, they never had any majority, like not even a simple majority. So it's like you always had to, do some deals with centrists. And in case of Brazil, I think it's called the dead center. Okay, so that means that there is a group of right-wingers who call themselves centrists, and I don't believe in a centrist or center-right in Latin America, and that does not exist in reality. Still,
Right.
they are more of a moderate groups. So these centrists actually are the ones that always had the majority. So maybe not qualified majority, nobody has it, but they had sort of majority. And Lula and Dilma also, I mean, she was a bit more radical, but still, they were not the sort of presidents that would ram through any sort of reform just by decree, because a decree does not actually ensure that it will last forever. Unless it is in the constitution, there is no guarantee of any sort of permanence of anything that you do. So they always try to get constitutional reform. And in order to get a constitutional reform, you need that qualified majority, which the Workers' Party does not have. Even all the left groups together, if they all got together, even then they would not have. So they would always have to have deals and negotiations with the centrists, the dead center. And that's a reason why Brazil could not have judicial reform, which means that the Bolsonarista judges are still in the Supreme Court. They're still in the other courts, like the state courts and elsewhere. But still, even they're not leftist or anything, but even those judges are actually prosecuting these fascists. So they are. Now, hmm, there were some fascists, including Bolsonaro's own son, who fled the country. Okay, and many of them ended up in Argentina. Now, what happened? Like, there was also a reversal in Argentina. We know that in 2023, like it's very recent, December 2023. So, another fascist pretending to be a libertarian and whatnot won.
Oh, he is a libertarian. Libertarians are
He,
mostly assholes.
he says that he is a libertarian. He says he is libertarian. He says that he is anarcho-capitalist. But those are just capitalism changing its spots. He is a neoliberal.
Exactly.
So, and when so these people, these fascists, those who fled to Argentina, they're under his protection. The government of Argentina is not extraditing them. That means that there is extradition request from Brazil to the government of Argentina so that they extradite these fascists back to their country so that they can go back and be prosecuted for their crimes of trying to do a coup, right? But they are not being extradited. They're living their life in Argentina. That means that I'd say that both the government of Brazil and the judiciary of Brazil are actually working to prosecute the fascists. If not do anything else, they are at least prosecuting the fascists, the ones that try to commit a coup. But what is called the intellectual authors, the masterminds, Bolsonaro's son, etc., they remain out of the country. They remain in the US. They remain in Argentina. So they are not.
Where is Jair Bolsonaro in all of this?
Well, Bolsonaro himself has not been named in the charge sheet of this thing. It could be because of two reasons. One, that he may not be the mastermind. Of course, he was the president and everything, but it's not like he openly used his government powers at that moment in order to do the coup. So that's one reason. The other reason is, which is something that all progressive Latin American governments has to consider, is the probability of another coup or worse, a US invasion. So in that case, I mean, for the sake of peace, for the sake of maintaining stability, both of the government and the country, there are times when you have to just let the fascists go, not in impunity, of course, but you will just take away their property and everything and let them go. So that is something. That's something that is something that the governments always have to consider. Otherwise, they might be invaded.
Well, that's a perfect segue to this question, which is, How has Lula's return and political comeback to Brazilian affairs been on the domestic front? Has he been able to do any meaningful change, any accomplishments we should know, or has he had a more difficult time in trying to achieve his center left goals due to the unhinged Bolsonaro opposition and other strong right wing opposition that's in Brazil?
Okay. So first of all, of course, this time also he does not have a majority in Congress, which means he has to go through the way of negotiations, which makes his work very difficult. In fact, this time the Workers' Party has even less power than it had during Dilma Rousseff's term. Okay, so that means that both hands are tied behind the back when it comes to the domestic front. Still, what he has been able to do is he has been able to recover the Brazilian economy. That was something like Brazil is one of the largest economies in the world, and Bolsonaro had just destroyed its image, its reputation, everything. So what he has been like, how Lula has been able to do is he has been able to recover the image, the reputation, and the general conditions of the Brazilian economy. He has also been able to reduce poverty, which is something like poverty is always a problem, has always been a big problem in Brazil. Of course, he has not been able to, he has not been there for long, but still he has been able to recover that sector also, like the poor people. He has tried to ensure that people do not die of hunger, which is something that's happening in Argentina. But in Brazil, that is not happening. There has been a good post-COVID economic recovery, recovery of people's purchasing power, and I would also say that a recovery of people's uh, maybe called the consumption of food, which is important, like consumption of meat, consumption of vegetables, etc. That has increased in Brazil compared to what was happening at the time of Bolsonaro, simply because people did not have the purchasing power. And the government also has restarted the system of giving people food. I mean, the subsidized food to people below the poverty line, etc. So these programs have been revived, which means there is no famine in Brazil. Okay, and these are, I would say that these are good achievements. What the government has not been able to achieve is the security problem. It not That is also a big problem in Brazil. Security has always remained a problem in Brazil. So, and it continues to remain a problem. There is. And apart from that, I mean, I think on the domestic front, except security, he is doing well. I mean, he has managed to do the economy, but although it is reflected in the society, it did not reflect in the municipal elections that recently took place. Like, for example, there were in big cities like Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo, etc. There was elections of mayors, and PT did not get a single mayor from any of the big cities, which was quite unexpected. They were expecting at least two. I mean, the elections are going to the second round, and they might win in the second round. They might or they might not, but they did not win a single big city in the first round. So
Damn.
despite the economic recovery, despite poverty alleviation, those gains have not been reflected in people's voting patterns. I don't know why. I really cannot tell you why. I have been trying to find out, and I mean, even people like Emir Sader are calling it an enigma.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like as if Lula still has a lot of work cut out for him, and hopefully it's up to the people power movement to advance.
Well, yes, and the largest people power movement in Brazil is the landless workers movement. You might know about it, MST.
Yeah.
So the landless workers movement is actually saying that Lula has not tried to do. I mean, Lula has not tried to conduct any land reform or rural reform in this term, like he did in his first term. I mean, one of his flagship programs during his first and second terms was the land reform or the agrarian reform, whatever you call it. So this time, like, yes, there has been a reduction, a lot of reduction in illegal mining and illegal logging in the Amazons. Like, Bolsonaro allowed everyone to go into the Amazons, take away the indigenous people's lands, and do whatever they wanted to do. And there were companies. I mean, it was not just people. There were companies like US companies, Canadian companies, logging and mining that were going into the Amazons and committing ecocide. Okay. But this time, of course, Lula has stopped all that. So those were already illegal. I mean, those were illegal in Brazilian laws also. So you could simply apply the existing laws to stop that. And he has done that. But the MST is asking, when is Lula going to try to do any sort of agrarian reform? Because that is something that Brazil needs, not just Brazil, any country needs a rural reform, agrarian reform, land reform, whatever name you wish to give, in order to really get out of cycles of poverty. So the people, like the rural people, people who depend on land, they can get out of poverty. They can own the land, and they can like make the land productive. They can own it, make it productive, and earn from it. So that is something that poor people need in Brazil, which has not been done yet.
And I'll just say one last thing before we switch to the next country, which is I give Lula an A+ on Palestine, a B- on Ukraine, but an F on Haitian affairs, and I will leave it at that. So changing
Venezuelan affairs, F on Venezuelan affairs recently.
exactly. Now, changing topics now, I wanted to ask you this. Now, several months ago, there was an attempted coup against the left MAS government of Brazil, led by Presidente Lucho or Louis
Luis
Arce
Arce.
Catacora. Now, there's been various conflicting reports and conspiracy theories that have blown my mind. What has Orinoco Tribune or your comrades who devote time to Latin America uncovered and can say about what took place? And my follow-up question is how do you assess his time in office? Because Mas was voted overwhelmingly back after there was a year-long, huge Western-backed coup that saw a fringe far-right Christian fascist take office. And sadly, there's been a huge falling out, it seems, between Lucho and Evo Morales, who wanted to challenge his leadership. And then I think Evo went on to form a new left-wing party, and Evo himself on Twitter, very bizarre. He was accusing his former minister Lucho of staging a false flag fake coup. So I'm curious your response, as it's very dismaying and concerning when we see left-wing governments and movements become bitter enemies and whatnot.
Okay, yes, you could. A lot of the things that you said or heard is true. Unfortunately, there has been a falling out within MAS. No, Evo Morales has not formed a new party, so it's still MAS, but there are two factions. So one is the Evo Morales faction, and the other is the Luis Arce faction, who is the current president. So the party has not yet broken, and I hope it does not happen. There might be a third way, which we are hoping for, and our comrades in Bolivia are, of course, hoping for. But what seems to have happened is that, well, I don't think that it was a fake coup. I believe that it is just Evo Morales imagining things. Let's say it like that. So it was a real coup. Like there was a real probability of the government being overthrown by the army. It seemed to be a badly cooked coup, or maybe uncooked or still not cooked, because there are reports, and they were revealed by Camila Escalante, whom you mentioned in the beginning. So she, and there are other people also, Brian Mayer, for example, they had revealed that there is a network surrounding the US Embassy in Bolivia. So network of so-called NGOs which are funded by the USAID, for example, or the National Endowment for Democracy, the CIA front organizations. So there is a network in Bolivia. And many of these NGOs, you might know that they pretend to be environmentalists and that sort of thing, or feminists or whatever, human rights. But in reality, they just want to overthrow the left government of Bolivia in whatever form it exists, and install their right-wing, of course, their right-wing friends. Human rights be damned, environmental rights be damned. So that's the basic thing. So there was this coup has been in the making for more than a year in the US Embassy and surrounding the US Embassy through this network. But military that was supposed to do that. I mean, the head of the military who has been removed. So when he just took a band of his people, he probably either got impatient or he thought that it was the right time because they were the ones who are supposed to know that what is the time to do a coup or not do a coup. That's generally understood. So when these army people saw that, I mean, they thought that they could commit a coup, they could get away with a coup, they could execute it perfectly. They just went in with their tanks and stuff. You must have seen the images and videos. So they went in with their tanks, with with part of the army, not everyone, with part of the infantry, etc. They just tried to, I mean, they got into the government palace, government building, and asked Luis Arce to resign. Well, that is how coups happen. Like when they said that, well, there was no violence, that they were initially asking Luis Arce to resign. That is exactly what had happened to Hugo Chavez in 2002, in April 2002. The army had gone into the, I mean, part of the army, some people in the army had entered the Miraflores Palace and gone into the presidential office and asked Hugo Chavez to resign. And when he did not resign, they took him captive. Okay, so that is exactly what they were trying to do here. I mean, that is normally how coups happen. It's not always like bombarding like the Moneda Palace in Santiago de Chile in 1973. It's not always like that. So Luis Arce, of course, refused to resign, and there was some. I think that he was being quite brave, and not just he, his minister of government, minister of the presidency, and other people like ladies and gentlemen who were there. They actually did a good work of trying to dissuade. And I believe that the chief of staff of the army who was leading this coup, he saw reason. I mean, they said that you are surrounded, like, because the other divisions of the armed forces had arrived who were still loyal to the president. So they were already surrounding the palace. So you see, there is the president and his ministers inside the government palace. There are the coup military ones inside the palace, and there are the anti-coup military who is surrounding the palace. So you can see that there would be a bloodbath and nobody would go out of it alive. So do you wish to do that? Of course not. So that is the reason why, I mean, the military guy, the chief of staff, the ex-chief of staff, he has been removed. So he saw that he had no chance of getting out alive of it. He had no chance of anything. The coup was not happening because the military was not like with him. It was not with him. It was with the president. So he decided to just surrender because that's still better because, you know, in Bolivia, there is no death penalty. So even if you commit a coup, you won't be killed. You would be in prison, of course, for a very long time. But at least you won't die. If you live, there is every possibility of you doing something in future. So he gave in, he surrendered, other people who were with him surrendered. They will be
And
giving,
is he
they will
sharing
get different jail
and
terms.
is he sharing a cell with that Christian fascist witch or?
Giannini Anius, so Giannini Anius got 25 years, I think, already. That is in one case. There is another case, the assassination case is still there. I mean, the crimes against humanity. Crimes against humanity, I believe, has life imprisonment, so she might get that also, which means that um, this guy will probably not get it.
So we can't send her to like Devil's Island or to like Guantanamo Bay, unfortunately, or
Well, hmm. Well, no, probably not, because contrary to what is said in the West, human rights are actually respected in Bolivia, in Venezuela, everywhere. There is no death penalty, first of all. Okay, there is not even the life imprisonment. It's just very, very long time. Well, you might die in prison, but you still have a possibility of getting out alive and do something about your life. You know, repent in prison,
yeah,
etc.
hopefully she can be converted to liberation theology and do some real good.
Whatever happens, I mean, she supports. You know, she can still write from inside prison. She can write. She gets books. She can write in newspapers. She is still member of Fundación Libertad. I believe Fundación Libertad is, of course, it says Libertad, but it has got nothing to do with freedom. It says that it is a libertarian one, but it is a neo-Nazi organization based in Spain. Okay, so she is part of that. She still remains part of that. She writes for them. So it's not like she is uncommunicated from the world, if that word exists. But anyway, so I think that the coup really took place. It's Evo Morales imagining things. But the one that is even worse is the infighting within mass. Because, you see, Evo Morales is of the opinion that Luis Arce is destroying the economy. Now, I don't know. There are problems in the Bolivian economy, but there are problems in all economies of the world. Bolivia is among the countries that has lower inflation in Latin America, for example. Of course, it just raised prices of oil, I mean, gas and all sorts of products like gasoline, diesel, and everything. It raised prices, but after a long time, after years, it raised its prices. So it's not like there is an inflation. I mean, there is, but it's not like a hyperinflation or runaway inflation, the way that Evo Morales is saying. Now, what is the problem? It is that it seems like a sort of war between Arce and Morales in controlling the party, or who gets to be the one who controls decisions. Now, this should not be like that, because MAS is not a party like that. MAS is not, I mean, MAS has a leader, but it is not like the president of MAS is the one who takes all decisions. MAS is based on popular organizations. It's based on unions. So there are like 6 regions of Bolivia, and each region has its union that is part of MAS. So it should be a consensus decision among all these groups. Unfortunately, there are divisions among these groups also about whether to go with Arce, whether to go with Morales, or there are also those who want to, like, who have their own ambitions. So in all of this, it's a bad infighting, and it only debilitates the left in Bolivia and in Latin America, because Bolivia is one of the bastions of left in Latin America. So the moment you somehow there is the right makes an inroads in Bolivia, and an inroads through election, which would be recognized by everyone, because if they win fair and square, then it has to be recognized. The left is not right. It recognizes when the right wins. So like in that case, it will be like a legitimate win. In that case, it will be very, very difficult for the left to recover both in Bolivia, and also it will be a like, very bad retrocession for the left in Latin America in general, which is already in a very bad position. It may look like the left has government here and government there, but it is already in a very bad position. And in that situation, if you have and in fighting in a party like MAS, which was one of the one of the forebearers, one of the pioneers of the first pink tide, one of the pioneers of how to do, for example, constitutional reform, like how to do constituent assemblies in this, how to do people's power, how to bring about change in a country that had been steeped in such deep racism, in a country that is majority indigenous. So many good things, and in that you have this left in fighting, then it is extremely, extremely perilous and extremely harmful for the left everywhere, not Bolivia, not Latin America, everywhere. So we believe that there should be a third way. And I mean, there is even problems with candidacy. I mean, Luis Arce wants to be the presidential candidate next year. Evo Morales also wants to be the candidate next year. And there is a group led by the president of the Senate, Andronico Rodriguez, who is saying that there should be a primaries. I believe that there should be primaries. That is probably the best way to resolve this crisis somehow. But in the middle of this, there is the Supreme Court of Bolivia, which has like canceled the candidacy of Evo Morales. And so it's in a very bad situation. We cannot see a way out. Primaries, probably Evo Morales, I don't know if he will be allowed to be in the primaries even. And what I hope is that neither of them becomes candidates, somebody else does. Then there are good people in MAS. There are many good people in MAS. There are many able people in MAS who can take the party forward, the left and the country forward. That could be the only way out.
Let's talk about Venezuela now. Let's shifting gears. Let's talk about Venezuela. What can you share us? What can you share with us about what's happening in Venezuela and the ongoing efforts of the Western-backed right-wing opposition to overturn the democratic victory of Maduro and his Socialist Party. And speaking of political fights and infighting, how are the efforts at reconciling the ruling Socialist Party with the Communist Party in Venezuela? And of course, people who watch my show know that I do not subscribe to anti-communist leftism. That being said, I've been very dismayed to see the falling out and even the actions of the Communist Party of Venezuela, but also Maduro and in relation. So I'm curious your response.
Okay, so that's a lot. I mean, there are two different things to consider. So first will be, but let's talk about the elections and the aftermath because it's still ongoing. I would just say that it is another coup attempt. Okay, the millionth coup attempt probably in Venezuela. A lot of them are related. So on 28 July, there was presidential election. You probably know this. First of all, it was quite early. I mean, we had imagined that it will be in November, but anyway. So it was in July. On 28th of July, there was presidential election. It had been declared ages ago, and people were like, they could, people, okay, so we have to go back to last year and especially to October. In October 2023, there was an agreement between the government and a part of the opposition. I will call it the far right opposition, which is like 5 parties, well, 4 parties, and there is a 5th one which is not even registered because it never took part in elections. That is the party of Maria Corina Machado, Vente Venezuela. And contrary to what is said in the West, Maria Corina Machado never participated in elections. Her party never participated in elections. That's why the party
Just
is
like
not registered.
Guaido.
Well, actually, Guaido's party, Voluntad Popular, did participate in elections. Okay, so, but Machado never did. Her party never did. Guaido did. Guaido was even elected as a parliamentarian. But Machado never did. She does not believe in elections. She believes that she has the God-given right to rule Venezuela. She believes that. She comes from a family that believes that. She comes from one of the largest oligarchic families of Venezuela that used to own steel plants and a lot of land. They got, I mean, all of that was expropriated, of course. So you can imagine she hates Chavez. She was in the 2002 coup. She was in the oil strike of 2003. She was in the coup attempt of 2006, in 2014, in 2017, and 2019, and then now. So she has a history, like her whole life has been coup attempts. She has lived like this. I mean, I don't know what she will do the day she stops. So, I mean, she doesn't know either. So there were like 5 parties, but one of them was...
She'll probably become a journalist at Globo or a journalist.
She actually has an NGO funded by the National Endowment for Democracy. You may find her pictures with Bush and people like that. So yeah. Yes, she was. She had been in the US in 2003 when the US was invading Iraq. Okay. So
and
that
her
is
supporters
the
also fly Israeli flags. So
yes, and that is very criminal. I mean, that is criminal in Venezuela. Zionism is considered a fascistic expression in Venezuela, so that's criminal. But so, and still they are not in prison or not killed. You know, if Maduro were really a dictator, then that would have happened. Anyway. So anyway, let's go back to October last year. And in October last year, there was an agreement between the government of Venezuela and 5 parties, of them 4 registered, the 5th not, called, the group is called Unitary Platform for Democracy. Okay. They call themselves that. And these are all far right parties, like, of course, Venta Venezuela, there is Primero Justicia, then there is Guaido's Voluntad Popular, then there is Acción Democrática, which is the oldest right-wing party in Venezuela, which used to be the Liberal Party. Okay, so when there was a 2-party system in Venezuela, it used to be the Liberal Party, Acción Democrática, but it is right-wing, of course. And then there was Un Nuevo Tiempo. So these 5 parties grouped in Unitary Platform for Democracy, they signed an agreement with the government of Venezuela that they will participate in the election, that they will renounce their anti-establishment ways, they will return to the path of democracy, they will participate in the next election, they will be able to propose their candidates, okay? And of course, there was one thing. For example, Machado, Maria Corina Machado, is disqualified. I will come why. She is disqualified from holding political office for 15 years. Okay. Then another leader of Primero Justicia, Enrique Capriles, who was a former presidential candidate, who was a former governor, he is also disqualified from holding political office. He is for corruption, Maria Corina for treason. So they're disqualified already. So there was this, and there are many other. There are others from the opposition who are disqualified for either for corruption or for treason. Treason is a crime in Venezuela. Of course, it is a crime in all countries. So in Venezuela, it's a crime that can bring you 30 years in prison. So these people, they were still outside prison or somewhere inside for treason for the 2014 coup or the 2017 one. And the government of Venezuela gave them the opportunity to present some appeal before the Supreme Court of Venezuela to set aside their disqualification, to allow them to participate in the election. Okay, but these people, when they signed the agreement, they said that they will consider as final the decision of the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court said yes, you can participate, then yes. If Supreme Court keeps you disqualified, then you remain disqualified. And they signed this agreement. And it was based on this agreement then that the election was declared, and they were allowed to present, they were given dates that by this time you would have to present your appeal to the Supreme Court. It was like 15th January, I believe. And initially, Maria Corina Machado was saying, I do not recognize Venezuelan institutions, no institution, not even the Supreme Court. I do not recognize the Venezuelan institutions. I will not present any appeal. But she did. She did present an appeal at the last moment, like on the last day. And there were others who did not, who had all said that they will do what Machado does. And then she betrayed all of them and presented her appeal, and the others did not. So you can see that right-wingers also betray each other. But of course, the Supreme Court did not did not repeal her disqualification. And why was she disqualified? Now let's come to this. So in 2017, okay, so there was already the US coup going on. The US coup was last coup. The Guaido coup actually started in 2015 when Obama declared Venezuela. I'll say it all the time. Every time I get a chance, I'll say this. When Obama declared Venezuela an extraordinary threat to the security and like national security and foreign policy of the United States of America. He declared Venezuela as an extraordinary threat to the United States. So with that, the Guaido coup had started in 2015. People may not remember it, but we do. And then, of course, the sanctions would come in 2016, then more in 2019. But in 2017, something happened. In 2017, at the meeting, at the summit of the Organization of American States held in Panama, also at that summit, Venezuela was still a member of the Organization of American States. It withdrew in 2019, of course, after the coup. So like after the Guaido coup. And so in 2017, Venezuela was still a member. It still had a representative and ambassador to the Organization of American States. He was Samuel Moncada, who is now the permanent representative at the United Nations. Anyway, so Venezuela has a representative. He is present at the summit of the representatives of the Organization of American States. And Maria Corina Machado turns up. And what does she do? Like of course, it was instigated by the US, planned by the US, definitely. Panama, the representative of Panama retreats and declares Maria Corina Machado as the alternative ambassador of Panama to the Organization of American States. And she goes there and she asks for sanctions and an invasion of Venezuela. Now, this is, of course, first of all, asking for invasion of your own country is definitely treason. Secondly, at that time, Maria Corina Machado was a parliamentarian. She was like a member of the National Assembly. Okay, she was elected as a member of the National Assembly in 2015. She was elected. So as a public official in Venezuela, you cannot hold another public post, however circumstantial, of another country. So she was becoming the alternate ambassador of Panama. This could not happen. So she lost her seat at the National Assembly because of this. Like she was expelled from the National Assembly, and she was disqualified from holding political office by the Comptroller General of Venezuela, not by the president, not by anyone. The Comptroller General of Venezuela analyzed the case, declared that she had committed treason and she should not be holding political office for the next 15 years. That ruling came in 2021. So from 2021 onwards until 2036, she won't be able to hold any political office at all. And it was this disqualification that she was appealing at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court rejected her appeal. She remains disqualified. But she, in the world, she presented herself as a victim of the Maduro regime, whatever that may be. And no, and the media, mainstream media in the West, in Venezuela, in Latin America, would just repeat her claims, present her as a fighter for human rights, for democracy in
But
Venezuela,
also,
and the real candidate.
but I now, I know Venezuelan expats. They're all, for lack of a better word, they're all rich or bourgeoisie. If you really want to be generous towards them. And I have to, so I think it's very important to ask this question. Recently, Alex Salmond, the leader of the S&P, passed away, and I did some research into how the media in Scotland treated the S&P, and apparently the media in Scotland, which is dominated by British oligarchs, British corporations, so forth, were actually quite hostile towards the S&P. So it was always hard to get a good objective view of his legacy and Nicola Sturgeon. We know that in Venezuela, most of the corporate media, whether it's in print or it's on television, is very hostile towards the late Hugo Chavez and Maduro. So, is the reason why so many of the expats who hate Chavez and Maduro and keep saying he's a communist dictator, is that because the press keeps saying that Maduro's going to lose, we endorse the opposition, and of course they lose, and therefore they just cannot accept the fact that they lost, even though if the Conservative Party of Britain was to lose, when the S&P loses, they just go, okay, tough shit, we lost, okay, we got to go back to the drawing board. So I'm curious your response on that.
I think press is only a part of the co-attempt. Like the media warfare is only a part of the co-attempt, important part, but a part. So the media war is more for outsiders, like for foreigners, or for people who are not really, well, who do not have the insight into Venezuelan affairs, for example. Of course, it's also inside Venezuela, but it's mostly through social media, because in Venezuela, mainstream media, their credibility is like their credibility is on the ground. Like there is no credibility they don't have. So people know that Univision is not even Venezuelan. Univision is lying. El Nacional, which is now currently is based in Colombia and Spain. It used to be a Venezuelan newspaper. So El Nacional is lying, and of course, Globovision, which is also a big Venezuelan mainstream outlet, it tries to be like O Globo of Brazil, like trying to present themselves as sort of liberal or sort of balanced, but they also lie most of the time. People know these things. People know, I mean, people in Venezuela know that the mainstream media, whether Venezuelan or US or whatever, they're lying. So EFE is lying, El País is lying, they know these things. And El País, etc., they are even monarchical newspapers, they know these things. So these are the things.
And the funny thing about El País, because I'm doing some research into Spain because I want to try to do some programs about Spain in the future, and reading about El País, reading about them on Wikipedia, they're presented as having a very center left viewpoint and very very pro European Union, but of a kind of a sort of a soft leftist, reformist way. But I know for a fact El País, and unfortunately, the center-left party, the ruling center-left party of Spain, is still very, imperialist and hostile towards anybody to the left of them in Latin America and elsewhere. So
Yeah, including anybody to the left of them in Spain, not just in Latin America. So it's that exactly that. Anyway, so we are talking about the Venezuelan election. Now, Maria Corina could not participate, of course, because her disqualification was not repealed. So what she did, of course, in the country, everybody knew that she was saying that she even had a slogan, she's hasta el final, like until the end. Okay. But of course, goodness knows what until the end. But she was like, until the end, she will fight, etc. But of course, she was not, she could not participate. So outside, she was saying that she was the real candidate. But of course, in Venezuela, there has to be somebody else. Like, so initially, the Unitary Platform for Democracy had registered Manuel Rosales, who is the governor of Zulia state. He's from Un Nuevo Tiempo, another party which is in this platform. And they also registered another person. I forgot his name. They registered two persons, and they also registered an ex-diplomat about whom I wrote also, an ex-Venezuelan diplomat, Edmundo Gonzalez. So Edmundo Gonzalez is very elderly, and he is not really a politician. He has a very dark past, because he used to be when he used to be the second, like when he used to be the joint ambassador, or maybe the deputy to the ambassador of Venezuela in El Salvador in the 80s. He colluded with the death squads, with Contra, with the US, and participated in all the massacres. I mean, a lot of massacres that Plan Condor massacres that happened in El Salvador. So he is accused of crimes against humanity in a Spanish court. And so that's very funny. So, and in El Salvador, the case went nowhere. It should go, but it is like there. State crimes are never closed. There is no statute of limitations. So someday something might happen in El Salvador. But he remains accused of committing crimes against humanity in El Salvador. So this guy, well, he remained in Venezuela. He had returned to Venezuela after that and had led more or less. He was even like later, in the 90s, he was ambassador to maybe Uruguay or somewhere. And during Chavez's time, initially, he was also an ambassador somewhere, maybe in Uruguay or somewhere, where he supported the coup against Chavez. So, of course, at that time, after that, he was like, he had to leave, like he had to resign from his post, of course, and he was no longer a diplomat. He became a spokesperson for the far right, but that was that. So he was not a known politician, like not like Capriles, not like Machado, not like Guaido or Julio Borges or all these people. No, he was not like that. But he was registered, and he was what Maria Corina said, that he was her candidate because she knew that she could control him.
yeah, and this is the guy who's
He's
in
currently in
Spain,
Spain. Yes, so he's
who fled
currently
to
in Spain.
Spain.
Yes. And he did not flee to Spain. He was given a safe passage to Spain by the Venezuelan government. He did not flee. So that is also a story. I mean, there are so many stories that I can tell you. So Edmundo, but she forwarded Edmundo Gonzalez as the candidate, and she was everywhere, like at all their political events, at everything. Maria Corina was with Edmundo as if propping him up. Okay, so she was trying, like people who supported her or supports the far right, she wanted those people to vote for him. Okay, because otherwise nobody knew him, so nobody would be voting for him. And remember, it is not like there were only two candidates. Finally there were 9 candidates, like 9 presidential candidates taking part in the election on 28th July. So what happened on 28th July? There was something that happened also. The voting was good, actually. The voting process was quite safe, without anything, like peaceful, no
Which
problem with the
turnout and so forth.
voting.
Yeah,
It's as usual, and there were international observers, like more than 1,000 international observers. There were accredited foreign journalists who could go anywhere. It's not like the government takes you to some places. They were at liberty to go everywhere in the country, including in the most rural, most far away places, and they did. I mean, those who wanted to do did. It's not like you have to sit in Caracas or sit in a hotel, like they say, they sit in Caracas in the mountain and then don't go anywhere. That's not like that. They would go, they went. I know that they went to Portuguesa, they went to La Guaira, they went everywhere. So, and voting was peaceful. Up to that, everything was peaceful and voting percentage was quite high, like 59, more than 59%. I was not expecting. I had commented, like on the day of the election, we had a live stream, and I commented that I would say that the best case scenario would be 50% participation. Turned out to be 59, which was very interesting. Now, the opposition was hoping that with higher percentage of votes, it would mean more vote for the opposition, because it's mostly the opposition people who don't vote. I mean, of course, in recent years, Venezuelans, there has been a reduction in the voting percentages in Venezuela because of the sanctions, because people have to think about eating, right? People have to think about survival, and there is less thought about voting. But recently, since starting from 2021 with the economic recovery, there has been also a recovery of the participation. So like in 2020, there was 30% participation in the regional election. This year in 2024, there was 59%. There is always greater participation in presidential election, but anyway, there was. And there was also a foreign vote, though a very low number this time, because most countries where Venezuelans are, like in Europe, US, Canada, they don't have diplomatic relations with Venezuela. So they do not have the diplomatic missions. So even Venezuelans who would want to vote, including right-wingers, they could not go to their diplomatic missions to vote. So of course, there were some who went to Venezuela to vote. There were right-wingers from Spain, from Norway, from Germany, who traveled to Venezuela to vote. And they were right-wingers. They were saying it openly in the airport that they were voting for Edmundo Gonzalez, that they were there to vote for Edmundo Gonzalez, for Maria Corina. They were saying they were going to vote for Maria Corina Machado. Okay. So what happened was that after the election, in general, within 2 or 3 hours after voting ends, the first bulletin is made public by the National Electoral Council, which is the electoral body. So Venezuela is a centralized electoral body, only one. It is the National Electoral Council, that is the electoral power, which is an autonomous one. Autonomous power of the state, it holds elections. So voting was supposed to end at, I believe, 6 p.m. In many places, it was extended until 7:30 or something, because people were still there. People just, at 5 p.m., people just think, oh, I have to go to vote. This is something that happens regularly. It's not like something new. It's not like that some outlets, I've seen some outlets saying that Chavistas were vote stuffing or something. That's not that. It always happens that after people have their lunch and have had their sleep, they think at 5 p.m. that they need to go to vote. So they do that. So there was, like in many places, voting ended at 7:30, at 8 p.m., etc. So at around 8 p.m., voting was declared closed. So we were expecting that by 10 p.m., we'll have the first bulletin. No, it did not happen. And of course, everybody was wondering why. And I would say that on the part of the CNE, that is the National Electoral Council, there has been a lack of communication. It has to be recognized that there has been a lack of communication. They should have said it before. What happened? What happened was that there was a cyber attack on the counting system of the National Electoral Council. And it was a big cyber attack. I think that they had, well, there are 16, the CNE has 16 firewalls. Okay, so you have to break through 16 firewalls in order to hack the entire system. So that was not possible. That is why the voting system could not be hacked. The Venezuelan voting system is automatic. You like
but sorry to interrupt, because I see that we're almost getting to a 2-hour mark. But I think long story short, it's just very important for people to understand Maduro won fair and square. It's next it's next to impossible to cheat. People can read Arnold August's brilliant article about it. He was an election observer. Dr. Mara Osman was also an election observer. I don't know if she's done interviews, because unfortunately Lebanon is under attack right now, and she still is doing her own journalism and her own university work. But I believe she has said on Twitter, "Look, I was an election observer. You cannot cheat." Bianca Mugeni, former director of the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute. I talked with her off the record, and she was an election observer. She said there is no way people could have cheated. Dimitri
Yes.
Boucheris, also an election observer, also an independent journalist, was there and said, "Look, everything was peaceful. Yes, there were some heated arguments, but there was no way people could have cheated." So, long
No,
story short,
yes, yes, yes,
Maduro
yes.
won.
It's true. It's true. I mean, nobody can hack the voting system. That is what I was saying. That it has 16 firewalls. It cannot be hacked so easily. I mean, you have to break through. But who are doing the hacking? The most of the like they got the IP addresses. I mean, uh, Venezuela got help, of course, in detecting it and to counteract this cyber attack. But it took more than a month. Throughout August, neither the CNE website nor any of the other Venezuelan government websites functioned. Like there were at least like some 100 websites just out of service, and not simply Venezuelan government websites. There were supermarket websites that were like private. They had also been hacked. So like Jesus, you know Jesus. So Jesus could not renew his driving license because the transport ministry's website had been hacked also. So there was a tremendous cyber attack against the entire Venezuelan state. Okay, the Supreme Court, the universities, everything throughout August, starting from 28th July night. But still, even then, the CNE managed to declare its first bulletin at 86% counting at midnight. Okay, and yes, it said that is what is said in the Venezuelan lexicon, irreversible trends. So it said that there is irreversible trends that President Maduro is being re-elected. So at that time, they gave like 51 point something percent. Then it was raised to more than 52%. Like he got more than 52% of the votes. So in the first round itself, he was winning. Like you get more than 50% of the votes, you were elected. Okay. So it happened. But what happened was that this is also something that has to be mentioned because this is also something that people bring up more all the time, including Lula did, which is a bad thing. They said that when CNE could not publish its results by the next day because it had been hacked, like its website had been hacked, its transmission website, Maria Corina Machado published voting records. Now, the thing is, these voting records are not published in Venezuela, not at all. Lula even demanded the publication of voting records. No, voting records are not published. What is voting records? Like, it's electronic vote, I said. So you deposit your vote electronically, but you get a receipt. Okay? So at the end, there is a box from which a receipt comes out where you can see, okay, you have voted for this person. And you drop that receipt also in another box that is kept there. And at every voting center, 54% of those receipts will be matched with the electronic voting system. So that is why they said that you cannot cheat. So nowhere in the world 54% is matched. Okay, so that is it. They try to block out all statistical loopholes in order to ensure that the election, whoever wins fair and square. So they were counting these things. So they had to do the manual counting because the transmission system had been hacked. So that is why the results had been delayed. And Maria Corina Machado claimed that she had published on like something website, Elecciones Venezuela or some website. She said that she had published it on that website, the voting records, and like some 3,000, 13,000, I don't remember the exact number. And the Venezuelan electoral roll is 21 million. Okay. And the voting percent was 59%. So out of that, even if she had published 13,000 voting records, which she could not do, and those were not voting records, they were faked, they were falsified, still, whatever she did, it was a crime. Again, she had committed another crime, an electoral crime this time. And then Edmundo Gonzalez, she was claiming, okay, we have these results and we know that Edmundo got 8 million votes. He got initially 70% and now she has come down to 60%. But whatever it was, she claimed that her candidate won, basically. And this was repeated while CNE was struggling with its website because it had been hacked. And all the Venezuelan government websites had been hacked. So it was this sort of thing. The radio and all these things there are people's radios like in the neighborhoods, in community, you have community radios. community radios were burned. So at the same time that this was happening, there was a coup attempt trying to overthrow the government violently. So community radios were burned. People were like, for example, children's schools were burned. Lots of things were burned. Hospitals were burned.
Hospitals were attacked. Community
Mhm.
centers where people voted were attacked. A lot of the places where people were voting were attacked, and
Schools, yeah, schools.
that's why Arnold, Dimitri Lascaris, Mauro
Mm.
Osman, Rania Khalek, and the team at Breakthrough News, People's Dispatch, basically all had to go. And again, I spoke with and I spoke with Bianca, and she said that the election observers she was with, which was a Canadian delegation, the government had to hide them from the mob violence and peacefully try to get them out of the country. But
Exactly. Exactly. That they had invaded the hotels, and in the lobby that there was police trying to keep those people out. And yes, I have also spoken to electoral observers who said the same thing. Like they were scared, and there was an attack on a bus of electoral observers where there were 60 people. So that sort of things. And 27 people are dead. Like 27 Venezuelans died in the violence. And none of them is from the opposition. Remember that most of them are police, but there are also civilians, and police is also civilian, let's remember that. And there are children, like there are also two minors who were killed. Like after 27 there are two minors who died in the violence. So, and after all these things, Edmundo Gonzalez was allowed to live by the Venezuelan government. Like he went into the embassy of Netherlands, then he went into the embassy of Spain, where he applied for asylum in Spain, and the government of President Maduro gave him the safe passage so that he could leave Venezuela and go wherever he liked. And later, Maduro announced that it was done for the sake of peace and tranquility and for saving the people of Venezuela. That was it. Like he is a criminal. There are cases against him for usurpation of electoral functions, this, that, all this murder, coup, etc. And now Maria Corina Machado has also gone to Spain. She has also been allowed to go to Spain.
Listen, we are going to go over times. But that being said, I'm going to skip my question about the conflict between the Communist Party of Venezuela and the ruling Socialist Party.
Oh,
So
I think you can go into our website. We have an interview by Jesus done with someone called Luigino Bracci. He is a Venezuelan, sympathizer of the Communist Party. But I would say, just in a few words, that there is an infighting within the Communist Party of Venezuela about this issue. So the older one part of the Communist Party is the one that actually fell out with the PSUV, the ruling Socialist Party. And the other part, well, they were also initially there, but now they're seeing that they're bleeding support, that people are not supporting them because they have repeated right-wing positions. They have repeated stupidities. Like they have said that Maduro is not the president, that Maduro did not win, or stuff like that. They have said things like that.
facts and
That's why
yeah,
there is
and in fact,
okay.
my friend Jay, who was the former central organizer of the Communist
Mhm.
Party in Canada, he told me that that in Greece, where they usually have a big meeting of all the international communist parties, he said that a lot of the communist parties internationally have been distancing themselves from from the Communist Party of Venezuela, that faction, because of that.
Yes,
So
actually, they have distance from the entire Communist Party of Venezuela because currently, those who are like the person like, who is the president of the Communist Party of Venezuela, he is also a National Assembly member. Like he was elected. He was the only one from the Communist Party who was elected. But anyway, that faction is the one that is recognized by the Communist Party itself, whereas there is an ad hoc board of the Communist Party declared by the Supreme Court because this infighting went to the Supreme Court. So there is a question of recognition even.
wow. Well, hopefully that can be resolved. Hopefully the Cuban government can be a good moderator for that. But to be continued, I'll make sure to check out that interview, and that's a topic that we will definitely revisit in the future. So, because we're going to go a bit over time, I have to ask this briefly: what's happening in Honduras? Now, this is a Latin American country during the Obama Stephen Harper era, both those governments and their allies overthrew a good left-wing reformist government under Manuel Zelaya. Now, his party and a broad left-wing coalition was able to mount a comeback after a decade of right-wing terror backed by the West. So, yes. Briefly, can you enlighten us what is going on in Honduras right now?
A coup attempt, basically. So there is a another US-backed coup attempt against the current president of the country, Xiomara Castro, who is the wife of Manuel Zelaya and who is also a big organizer. Well, always remained a big organizer on. I mean, initially they were not even left; they were just center-left sort of social democrats and liberals. But Manuel Zelaya did try to do some good. He joined the country to Alba. He joined the country to. He wanted to tour the join the country with align the country with Venezuela, with Cuba, not politically maybe, but socially with projects, with social programs, etc. And he also wanted to do consultation on a constitutional reform. This is something, or a constituent assembly. This is something that the US hates everywhere. Like, because it wants constitutions to remain what they were 200 years ago, so that today, in the changed conditions, people cannot have power anymore. And everywhere there has been a constituent assembly and a change in constitution brought about by the leftist governments, the US tried to overthrow that government. In most cases, it succeeded. In the cases it did not succeed, one of them is Venezuela, another is Bolivia. Okay, so in case of Honduras, it is the same sort of situation. So when Xiomara Castro was elected after 12 years of right-wing rule, not just right-wing, like narco terror backed by the US, and the president was a narco. Anyway, so in this situation, when she came, so things that she did, I mean, she did a lot of wonderful good things. She has like reduced, for example, she is giving subsidies, electrical subsidies to poor people. She's giving food subsidies, and she closed down what is called the special economic zone, special economic development zones. And these special economic development zones were not really like anything industrial or economic. They were supposed to be either extractivist, meaning mining, and open pit. She first of all prohibited open pit mining in the country, and this has harmed the
The Canadian
interests.
mining
She
companies.
has harmed the interests of the Canadian mining companies, and not just Canadian and European. Swiss. There are many Swiss mining companies. People think Switzerland is a peaceful, neutral, but no. So in the Honduras, Swiss mining interests have been harmed, etc. And then she also blocked those special economic development zone programs, which were mostly like real estate, like take away indigenous people's land, turn it into real estate, and then they will be owned by rich people in the West, basically. Okay. And there are already, I mean, in Honduras, do you know that there are private beaches, private forests, private hills? These should not be private. These are commons. Land cannot be private. But this happens. This is in Honduras. This is also in Panama, in Costa Rica, everywhere. Anyway, so in Honduras, she has tried to reverse all these things. And she never promised a constituent assembly, but her party has it as its program that it will, when conditions permit, it will do a constituent assembly. The US hates this, and the US does not want the Livre party, which is a socialist left-wing party, progressive one, to continue. So Xiomara's term is almost ending. It will end next year, or maybe 2026. There is election in 2025, like that is next year. So before that, there will be primary election, etc. And before that, even before that, the US is wanting to overthrow because Castro is popular. Okay. And there is every possibility that her successor will be elected. So it is that, okay, so in Honduras, you cannot be elected successively. So there is like a term limit. She has to go, but there is every possibility that her successor will be elected. She will continue with her programs, or he or she, whoever that person is, will continue with her programs. And that person may also, of course, that person will have a more maneuvering room. Okay, because whatever Castro has done. So this person will probably go further. And the US is afraid of this. What if they suspend the extradition treaty? Well, the extradition treaty has already been suspended. So What if they close down the Palmerola Air Base, which is the largest US air base in Central America? What will happen if, well, it's also already not doing anything in the war on drugs, etc. So they're trying to do a coup. Maybe soft coup like they tried to do in Nicaragua in 2018, or if not, a hard coup like they did in 2009 against Manuel Zelaya. That's exactly what is happening.
Wow, unbelievable. And from Brazil to Bolivia to Venezuela to Honduras, our final topic is going to be Colombia. Now, from what I gather, Colombia, which is no longer at war with one another, Petro has been a fairly good leftist leader, able with popular support to pass much needed policies to help the majority poor and working class and precarious middle class in Colombia. On international affairs, he's been a friend to historic Palestine and for a while Venezuela as well. And he's been sort of backtracking his alliance, or at least his détente with Maduro Venezuela. But overall, good government. But there's been talks and many concerns in leftist social media that there's been talks and many concerns that the right wing opposition and that the right wing powers that be in Colombia are trying to mount a coup against him. So, talk to us about what's been happening and developing in Colombia before we close the program.
Okay. So in Colombia, what is happening at the moment is a coup, but a sort of lawfare actually. So yes, lawfare has been a weapon of coup in many countries, everywhere, like against Dilma Rousseff. It has been there against Lula himself. It was there against Rafael Correa. It's still continuing that lawfare against Rafael Correa. And there is a lawfare against Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner and people who are very close to her, etc. So the lawfare exists and it is a very big weapon. In Colombia, they're trying to do the same, but this time through the electoral body. So the National Electoral Institute, I think, is called. So the Electoral Institute is claiming that Petro exceeded spending limits during his presidential campaign. No, it's
Ah,
not
that
as
sounds
if
very familiar. That sounds like Delta all over again.
it sounds very familiar, right? So yeah, and they're saying it, and they're claiming that, well, from whom did he receive those? They're also investigating the organizations from whom he received those funds, and they're claiming that they're trying to claim that that is organized crime, but who are they branding as organized crime? Teachers unions, indigenous peoples organizations, and then of course political parties that are part of the Pacto Histórico, the coalition that presented Petro as the candidate. So these are actually being presented as organized crime, while real organized crime, that is narco trafficking, and the one who the people who committed it, like Alvaro Uribe, committed crimes against humanity. Ivan Duque committed crimes against humanity and also tried to invade Venezuela. So these are the guys who are doing this. I mean, who are claiming this, who are making these claims against Petro, and they are the ones who are pushing this investigation from behind. Of course. So the coup attempt is through the National Electoral Council. They tried to do other coup attempts. First, they removed the foreign minister. So the foreign minister who actually re-established the relation with Venezuela, he was also removed through a lawfare about paying bribes to someone which has not even been proved, and they tried to like use as witness his wife's babysitter or somewhere, and that sort of thing. Like don't so many different connections, and that person has been removed. The current foreign minister appears to be more right-wing because he is the one who is pushing this anti-Venezuela line, which is Petro is also repeating. And I mean, I don't know why Mexico has backtracked from that, because AMLO knew and Claudia Sheinbaum knows that that is wrong. Okay, but Petro is doing that. And in case of Colombia also, there is a big problem, similar sort of problem as in Brazil, that Pacto Histórico does not have a majority in Senate. It has majority in Congress, but it does not have majority in Senate. So a lot of its reforms, like health reform, just passed, and labor reform had to be watered down a lot, and that is the sort of problem he is facing in implementing his work.
Like so much of Latin America, a right-wing judiciary.
Yes, there is a right-wing judiciary that is conducting this case against him. There is also a case against Alvaro Uribe, but it is not about his crimes. It's about some bribes and trying to defame someone. It is trying to defame, I think, Ivan Cepeda Castro, who is close to Petro. So that case, Alvaro Uribe is facing. So the judiciary is trying to present as if it is going against both. Like it's going against Alvaro Uribe, it's going against it's going against Petro. But against Petro, it's trying to remove Petro from power. In case of Alvaro Uribe, it's not even like it's not prosecuting him from the false positives. It's not prosecuting him from killing people. It's not prosecuting him from the war on drugs. So it's prosecuting him from the defamation of Ivan Cepeda Castro, which is a lesser crime, which might not even lead to jail time, maybe only fine, something like that. So they're trying to remove Petro. Yes, it is a coup against Petro. It started before. Petro did not see it at the time, probably. Maduro had warned him, and now he had a fallout with Maduro, and at the moment, no, Venezuela has not renounced support, of course. In fact, recently, like 2-3 days ago, the foreign minister of Venezuela announced that Venezuela will be with Petro until the end. They will support Petro will get all sorts of diplomatic and political support, everything that Venezuela can give, except, of course, military, because that's something Venezuela does not do. But Petro has to remember who are his friends, of course, and who are trying to save him from a coup and who are trying to coup him, basically. I forgot to mention, there were assassination attempts on the vice president, Francia Marquez, earlier. An assassination, 2.
Okay.
There were 2 assassination attempts on her when she was traveling to, I think, Cauca, to the Department of Cauca, to inaugurate a university or look after the progress of the works at a new university. So that is the sort of thing that they're doing. And it's narco, probably. And the talks with ELN, I mean, the National Liberation Army, which is one of the armed groups, that is at the moment going nowhere, because amid the coup, everybody has forgotten about the talks. And there is this FARC dissident group called Estado Mayor Central, which is also in Cauca, probably, because that is where they are the most powerful. They are doing all sorts of bad things. They're trying to terrorize people, basically. So Petro is being cornered from all sides at the moment.
It's terrible, but well, the final question is, do you see if he was to be impeached, like Pedro Castillo and Delma, and thrown into jail, or not thrown into jail, but just kicked out, and the far right makes a comeback, do you think that the Colombian people, that the left movement there, the people power movement there, will be ready to mobilize?
They're already mobilizing. That's a good thing. So before this coup, I mean, there was a problem among the people power movement, because there were many who were expecting a constituent assembly, or Petro to do a constituent assembly. Well, he had not promised it, but he had hinted at it. So there were people who were expecting him to do something like that, or they were expecting more reforms, or they were expecting a pacification of the country, the talks with the ELN to be finalized, something like that. And these things were not going anywhere, right? So in this situation, there were problems among the left. But the coup against Petro seems to have united the left in a good way. I mean, that is probably the only good outcome that has come out of it. So people are already mobilizing. They have been mobilizing for days, like the whole month of September. They have mobilized. They're still in the streets. They're trying. They will say, the people will save. I mean, I think the people will save Petro. Something that did not happen with Pedro Castillo. I mean, people tried, but they could not. I don't think Petro will be sent to prison, because overspending is not that sort of crime. So unless they can find another crime through which they can impeach him, and of course, impeaching, you cannot just impeach a president. You would need 2/3 majority in both Congress and Senate. The right-wing opposition, however powerful, does not have it. So they cannot impeach him in the correct way. I mean, they cannot impeach him legally. So if they have to, of course, they can always do illegal things, but I don't think they will be able to impeach Petra. Petra will not be impeached. If anything, there can be a coup, a violent coup, but not lawfare will not succeed.
What needs to happen internationally, especially in the West, whether it's Western Europe or Eastern Europe, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Great Britain, there needs to be an anti-imperialist movement, a robust anti-imperialist movement, and the kind of actions, the kind of direct actions we're seeing towards Palestine, we need that plus 1,000 when it comes to all of Latin America, especially the country of Haiti, which we haven't gotten the chance to talk about, but that's another topic for another day.
Yes, you know who to talk about Haiti. You know
Oh
people
yeah,
who will
of course, yeah.
talk about that country with
as
you.
as Dr. Jemima Pierre says, if you think that your sovereignty is more important at the expense of Haiti, you can go to hell and you deserve whatever's coming towards you. But
No. But I'll say something.
yeah,
That
final words.
well, we remember Lula's role when it came to Haiti. We hope he does not repeat it. He has not yet repeated it.
He
In case
kind of
of like
has, but
at least in case of actually the US did not get support anywhere in Latin America. That is why it had to go to Kenya to put a black face on the international support security mission, whatever it is called. So it had to go to Kenya and had to get and even in Africa, it could not get any government except that one. And that is the only one that is supporting. Like it could not even get Uganda or governments like that. So this time, at least Lula has not put the blackface on this foreign invading force in the name of the United Nations.
interesting. Well, we were joined on this edition of 1+1, our All Things Latin America edition with Saheli Chowdhury, who, let me remind you, is an Indian journalist, part of the editorial team of the superb but criminally underrated Orinoco Tribune, which is an independent journalist outlet that covers Latin American and international affairs through a Chavista, leftist, anti-imperialist perspective. Saheli, always an honor to have you on to educate me and the audience. Keep up the great work you do. And folks, do subscribe and donate generously to Orinoco Tribune and give all my best to Jesus and your team. And also, folks, do donate generously to 1+1 and please share widely all of 1+1's content. Otherwise, the channel doesn't grow and we don't reach the much needed wider audience that we need to reach. So Saheli, please come back soon. And next time, we will definitely do an update on what's happening in Argentina and do an entire episode about Argentinian history. But for now, all my best. Power to the people, death to Western imperialism, be it Yankee, Canuck, Anglo, or Pan-Europeanism. And of course, rest in peace, rest in power to Nathalia Urban. Obrigado for her fantastic journalism, and long live her revolutionary, compassionate spirits.
Thanks a lot, Youri, for having me, and thanks a lot for the space that you gave to Orinoco Tribune, which is like, well, you are one of the only ones, like one of the few dear, real friends, consistent friends that we have. So thanks a lot.
Likewise.